Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Stackability AI. I'm your host, Austin. I'm joined by Mike, our co-host. How's it going today, Mike?
It's a good day. Always a good day.
Always a good day in AI lands, indeed.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about our topic today, which is about the Sag-Aftra strike. In our last episode, we talked about how the WGA handled it, and now we're going to talk about the impasses of the SAG part of the AI warning. AI, the last fight against AI in the arts. So, what are you thinking, Austin, about this topic? How's it, from a technology's perspective, going to impact things?
Yeah, indeed. It's interesting because part of me thought that the conversation might be close to being over with the first episode when we were talking about this whole conversation in context of the Writers Guild. But, clearly this is kind of like a whole separate beast. But to answer the question about the technology part of things, to me, one of the big parts of this whole ordeal here on the conversation that's being had and the agreement that's trying to be worked out here is the whole idea of one's likeness. And just the other day in the news, I was reading about this. Was it Disney? I think had a new movie that came out, and like half of the background audience was like zombie AI, lifeless
Right.
beings, right? So anybody that has really tried to generate any um, like non-direct human representations using AI, like they often come out very strange. If you've ever played with any AI generation, like art models or image models,
What about Meta?
you know,
They first launched and they were doing the virtual rooms and stuff, and everything looked
yeah,
like Pinocchio or like some kind of caricature, a disturbingly off in an off-putting way. It was so not human in an attempt to be human, and I think that's the thing that kind of puts us off. It's like not when it's a cartoon because we know that's a cartoon, but when something is trying to be photorealistic but it's not quite there, makes us feel uneasy. I think.
yeah,
How do you feel
indeed.
about that? Yeah.
It's quite creepy. I mean, but we have to understand though, like this is, I always like to refer to this as MVP technology. It very much is. And the fact that it can even produce what it can produce now is pretty mind blowing. So, regardless of what's, potential opportunities it would take away from, actors, actresses, working professionals, it's pretty remarkable stuff. And it's interesting to see that it was snuck into a Disney movie already. I'd really be interested in diving into that. Maybe we'll do that in one of these episodes and kind of look behind the scenes and how that whole thing went down.
I mean that's where the technology is driven from, though, right? It's these individual companies trying to solve individual problems, that can't be solved at scale, right? I mean, if you think about these special effects companies for the last 30 years, trying to come up with better and better things for like only an audience of three. And now that technology is unleashed on an audience of, 8 billion.
Yeah.
It's going to, once a market's created for something, the technology, loop goes as it does, right? It's that what is the theory, Austin, about exponential growth in technology?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
you know,
Indeed.
and that now with a boom of use cases, beyond the millions, then that technology that was designed for a single purpose is now has to take on a whole new life. And that actually is a lot. It just ties me back into the story of stackability, and why we are talking about this stuff is about you're not going to learn all the skills you need to have in a day, but you have to be able to like skill stack. You have to be able to like learn new things all the time. And there's never been a time in history where you need to start utilizing that skill pronto. The technology is moving. It has been moving. I mean, I lived more than half my life without a cell phone, and now I can't imagine living without it. And 5 years from now, what won't people even remember about now that they used to use? They'll be making memes about stuff that happened 5 years ago. um,
Yeah, they'll be making memes in a year.
yeah.
So let's pause. Let's pause there because it's an interesting thought. In terms of the skill at hand in this whole thing, and of course we're going to get into the meat of, some of the bullet points here, and the agreement and what the two parties are trying to accomplish here. But what would you say that the skill set is that the general person that would be working in this industry could utilize right now to benefit themselves kind of like immediately within the next like few months or something like that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest and probably the best, oldest, and most profound advice that you could give anybody who's in the Sag-Aftra or even the WGA is like, create what you want to be seen in the world. Like, if you're just a person who's going to read other people's lines, you need to figure out a plan. And the thing is that right now, it's never been easier to make your own content. Right now, for most of us have a laptop or an iPhone or a Android or whatever. For $15, you could get a little bit better camera. For $40, you could get a little bit better microphone and make your own content, write your own content, do your own skits, build your own stuff, build your own skills. Use the tools that are available to you. You don't have the time to write a blog. Have AI help you write the blog, and then sell your blog for $50 so you can buy the better microphone. You have to do it on your
Yep.
own, and there's nobody in your
100%.
way. And that falls specifically into this category because you're an artist and create things. It's, if you can only do one thing, then do that the best of your ability, and be happy doing it. And don't put limitations on yourself. And you could do anything you want, but you need to be prepared for what's coming and understand that when you're looking at a contract from a company that you think is reputable and you think you want to work with, and they're offering you a contract, you should probably read it, and you should probably take it, scan it, throw it up into AI, and say, is there anything I should be concerned about with this? And then look at what's coming back at you and see whether or not you're putting yourself at risk for you're giving up your future rights to ever be yourself again. There's these clauses in these contracts and a lot of weird stuff happening where it's kind of people who are in the know are trying to get a one up on the people who aren't. So I think it's time to start, learning about whatever business you're in. If you're an actor or if you're, a pizza maker, you need to learn how these, people who are in the know are trying to figure out how to take advantage of the situation. Um,
Yeah,
not to
I
be
agree.
counter, but I think you just have to be aware.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and we discussed that a little bit in the previous episode. In terms of just really being mindful of the terms and conditions. I would say that's. I mean, it's a fantastic point, and it's more and more important now than ever with all of this stuff that's being discussed and the profound way that these technologies can just supercharge the efficiency of any business. And
But like literally an AI bot that would read the terms and conditions for you and like flag things based on your preferences.
well, that's even like the thing is like you don't even need a product to do that. You could just do a chat GPT. There probably is a subset of a product where you could like streamline it and, tune the model or, have like a nice UI that helps the whole thing. But just to get started, and that's another kind of good idea, something that we should explore is a lot of these tools that are out right now that are coming out that are being built, like they're just built on top of chat GPT.
Right.
At the end of the day, there's an OpenAI model or something, an open source Hugging Chat model, and built on top of some sort of thin software layer built on top. But it's a good point. So, um, digress a little bit here, but let's jump into the meat of the conversation.
Yeah.
Um, how about you start off? Like, take us through the first part of what's being discussed here.
Right. So, I mean, the basic parts that really narrow down to artificial intelligence, right? It's a very AI is very vague in terms of its scope, obviously, and all of these things that we're talking about now are and not at all legal. They're just ideas about how to possibly protect themselves, the actors protecting themselves against overuse and ownership, like who owns my identity, who owns my likeness, who owns my um, essence, right? It's a weird thing because if they have your voice and they have um your physicality and they can do whatever they want with that, like that's a strange thing to have to litigate or to kind of prove at some point that no, that thing that's on the screen that looks exactly like me, that sounds exactly like me, that said these awful things, that's not me, right? It's that's going to be harder and harder to prove in real life. It's how do you do that? So this is where I referred to earlier is like this is the last fight. This is our last chance to get some of these things written down. So in
Yeah.
the WGA agreement, which I thought was a pretty solid agreement, as we discussed before, had some things in there that were seemed like universal good ideas, right? With the actors, it's a little harder. I don't know. Maybe it's not harder. It's all just words versus your likeness. But ownership. What does ownership mean to your identity? And then so you have ownership of AI generated performances. SAG wants to make sure that the performers have ownership and control of their AI generated performances. So to me, this is like, well, I couldn't make it for those 2 days of filming, so that I allowed them to use my likeness for those 2 days. Or I didn't want to do this nude scene, so I allowed them to use another likeness in that part. But that's still me. It gets weird. It's like it includes the right to approve how their performances are used and receive compensation for their use. So it becomes negotiable, I guess, which is good because then you at least have a right to approve or disapprove of a performance if they want you to do something that you don't believe in ethically or morally or whatever. You don't want to do that. You can't have them do things with your likeness. But I don't know.
Yeah.
What are you thinking of? How would that something like that be enforced from a technology perspective? How is there enough mapping and intelligence built into it that you'd be able to tell the difference between a digital video of something versus a AI generated video?
It's going to become increasingly hard to know the difference. Like right now, you can. I think take the example we just spoke about with the Disney film, and the background
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Performance.
cast was 50% AI generated, and they looked like lifeless zombies. However, like that's going to be, I would imagine very soon, like that's not going to be a problem. So I think this is where the opportunity for products to be built, digital watermarking technologies, the likes of such to be built and really used immediately. Because the
Mm.
problem is this is going to be very hard to control at scale. If none of these protocols are in place and there's no way to really combat against such things, and you have millions of shards of AI content out there, it's going to be very hard, if not, it's going to be impossible. So that's what the timing of this is very important on so many different levels, specifically around regulation and digital watermarking and just figuring out how to navigate this when, something has to be litigated, if the line is crossed and, someone has to pay for it. So
Yeah.
it's really where the true complexity comes in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. And it's starting from the foundations and working with small businesses. I'm realizing and learning more and more about um, how much the foundation of how organized you are permeates forever. So
Yep.
it's like if you are not starting off a business and you're not starting to be organized and get things in the right places and update your databases correctly and move your information from one place to another smoothly and take care of the bookkeeping type of things you know from a base point, any transition or any scalability is automatically going to be more difficult, right? And I look at these contracts as kind of or not contract yet, but these ideas as the foundational skeletal properties of what you're trying to build the future on, right? This is not supposed to be like a 1 year deal. It's going to be going forward, and then at least it'll give us a framework to go from. So those things that you were mentioning from a digital perspective of like a kind of digital watermark, I think is something that is going to kind of become the thing, right? So you'll have, maybe you'll have a United Artists, they're the company that represents all the big um, artists and in music and everything, right? So they would then probably sign a contract, for you and your likeness. Now your likeness would get 25% of what you would get or something. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, do you want to hire the actor or would you like to hire their likeness? And it's like,
Yeah, I love it. I think that's a huge point right there. And this is where I think there's massive opportunity from these organizations whom are up until now like very archaic in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Now is the time to you've essentially been given another chance to revolutionize yourself from a digital standpoint and take ownership back to yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I would highly encourage, anybody listening that might be in the position to do that, to start having those conversations and, maybe take it upon yourself, break out, do your own thing, start meeting people that if you're not technical can help build this stuff. Like it's like if someone doesn't do it, it's going to be a bad situation where the little guy is just steamrolled, because the time savings and the value that is added by automating any of this stuff at scale is tremendous. And I think that if it's not stopped, I mean, it won't be stopped, and it's going to be, quite an interesting thing to see unfold.
You don't want to let it become another, big industry without being a part of it.
Exactly. That's a good way to be a part of it.
Yeah. So it's like if you don't do you now, somebody else is going to do it. I mean, you've seen it in the music industry, the business, movies, whatever it is. It's like they're the ones with the big bucks and they can afford to do whatever. But if you have the ideas now, they're not innovators, they're not creators, they're just money people, right?
Well,
So
they don't need to be. Like these
yeah,
companies don't need to be because they already have the audience at scale, and it's almost like a too big to fail situation, right?
yeah.
So,
But let's get back to the list.
well, I think that's a good segue into the next part. The fair compensation for AI generated performances.
Yeah.
Um, what is fair compensation? How do you figure that out? Sag-Aftra wants to ensure that performers are fairly compensated, for their AI generated performances. What do you think about this part?
Well, I think this is more to what we've actually seen now with a couple of examples where people have paid a licensing fee to use these higher more well known actors, a licensing fee to use them digitally, so they're able to make a commercial with Beyonce or something. And they've already paid, so they paid the $1 million, and I'm sure there's a structure to it, right? Because they have high priced lawyers and all that stuff, but they are leasing their likeness. So right now the market is whatever the market will pay, right? For, if I have to pay real Beyonce or, virtual Beyonce, I'm sure there's a discount on the virtual Beyonce at this point. So I might choose to use the virtual Beyonce if I'm, can't afford the real thing. But, superstars aside, if I go to be an extra in a movie and I'm getting paid a day rate, whatever that is, $150 or, $500 for the day, in the fine print, they might be asking to be able to use my rights and the rights to my likeness for eternity and forever, and beyond, right? And that seems like an odd, you know, compensation for things like that, right? So, what is fair compensation? Even the fairly compensated people in the music business or the movie business aren't fairly compensated. The SAG in the WGA writers strike, we found out that the average writer in the WGA is only making $26,000 a year. That's to write and create all the content you see on every platform everywhere. So
Yeah, it's peanuts.
that doesn't seem fair. So what's the compensation for your likeness? There was a old Friends episode where Joey did a photo shoot for a company and he didn't do any research on who the company was, and it wound up being for like a STD awareness campaign. And so now he's walking through the subway and he sees himself in this STD thing, and he's looking at a girl, and the girl sees the photo of him having an STD and then looks at him again. It's like, he didn't know what he was signing up for. And I think with the digital way, it could be anywhere. All of a sudden you'd see yourself in a car commercial or something, where the company's making a lot of money for your likeness because for some reason or another, your likeness does very well in Idaho. And you're not getting paid for that. That seems like an unfair compensation for a day's labor, you know.
Don't you think? Do you think that one could make the case? I'm going to go out on a limb here for a second. That say I am one of these production studios or whomever, hires Sag-Aftra talent. I would be like, I'll pay you quadruple your rate, because what's going to happen is now I'm going to get that upfront fee of say whatever it is, but then I'm going to be able to like scale your likeness and make my money back immediately. So like, why not just pay him like fairly? I mean, it's not impossible at all.
No,
Cut these guys a break. Say, here you go, man.
often,
Like I know this is like obviously not how the world works. That's why like I'm going off on a limb here, but like there'd be no way that you could not do that as any of these entities. It would be very much within the realm of possibility.
Austin, I've spent my life in sales, doing software sales in various companies all throughout. From my earliest days, I understood that everything in the world has been sold, right? At one point or another. Every lamp, every photo, everything, right? So when I was in sales and working and doing that every day, it was never about enough. So one of the jobs I wound up having, I told them, after I had been seasoned and I knew what my value was, I told the owner of the company, I said, look, your compensation plan is terrible, but I like your product. I'm going to come in here and we're going to talk about the things we can do to sell your product well. And then in 3 months, we're going to renegotiate my contract because your compensation structure is completely off. And I'll explain to you why, but I want your credibility. I want to earn your credibility first. So, I go in there and, I do what I say I'm going to do. And, we're there and everything's going great. And we're having kind of the year end review. And I'm explaining to them what exactly they're doing wrong. And then I took a moment and I said, one thing you have to understand is that whatever you're paying me is only a small percentage of what you're making. So when I tell you this comp plan and understand that we're going to do better in sales and we're going to do all this stuff, like you have to understand that at the end of the year, at the end of the day, it's a small percentage that you're paying me one time, and then you're going to have that revenue forever, right? And I explain that because my whole history in sales had taught me that no owners understand that. They don't. They don't care. They worry about overpaying. They worry about somebody making too much money. Meanwhile, the person is only making a small percentage of whatever they're making. So I've seen it at every level of business, from a $5 billion business to small businesses who micromanage little bits of dollars to try and, hold back, or, keep the reins on somebody who could like really blow out the business. And all these things are so short-sighted because you wind up losing, your best talent. And they're not smart enough to know that. The big companies don't care, right? But you have to fight for the fair compensation. You have to speak up and say, this is what I'm worth. And what I respect about the WGA and SAG in this case, they're doing that. They're at least throwing down the gauntlet and saying, hey, look, we need to figure out what fair compensation is. Whether or not that's ever going to come to pass, like as long as it's in writing, it's still part of the conversation. Whereas, we know technologically in 5 years, they're not going to need anybody to do this stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. Like the solve to the AI is the AI itself, in the sense like it's like, hey, here's this potential threat. Cool.
Right.
Is what it is. But all I have to really do, not all, but one thing I can do is I can take the contract, toss it into Chat GPT, and it can summarize it for me if I don't want to read the whole thing. And at least like that might make me more aware of what's going on. If I'm completely like, a pure creative beast and I don't have any business sense and I'm,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's sort of talent. So that's number one. Number two,
You do copy and paste,
now,
you might be able to
yeah,
protect yourself. Like,
but now I can go one step further and ask it, hey, how would I negotiate this contract? And I could tell you that would put you ahead of most of the people in this situation. So maybe a little tidbit right there for
I think
sure.
that's a good tidbit. And I think that is a good introduction into the idea about like not having to learn everything about AI all at one point. We're here. There's a lot of new tools. There's so many tools that we'll never be able to talk about all the tools because half of them will be out of business within a week, and the other ones will just be gobbled up because everybody's creating the same thing. But the idea that you don't have to learn everything about it, like you can download one little thing, or even just go to Chat GPT, or go to your Google Chrome and type in bard.google, and you'll have a chat bot that will answer a lot of questions for you. I was doing it the other day, just about moving a business location, whether or not I should keep it in Florida or move it to here, or if I was going to move it, where would I move it? And it's literally a stream of consciousness conversation with my browser. And what about that? And well, is there any ramifications for that from a tax perspective? And it's like this conversation with, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot about like, why do I already trust it? Like why am I trusting this thing that's talking to me? But I prefer to type, but I could probably have the same conversations through a microphone, but my biases won't let me yet.
Right.
But there's a lot of good things that could come from it. And I think you should just start whatever your business is, whatever industry you're in. First thing you do is Google, how is this affecting the travel business? How is this affecting the laundry business? There's reasons and ways that it's affecting it. It might be a positive thing. Like you might be able to, go into a laundromat and start your machine from your Bitcoin and in your phone and be wonderfully happy with that. But you have to know that it's coming, because if you don't, then you're sitting there with 75 quarters pumping them into a machine, and the guy down the block, can do it in 35 seconds, and I'm going to go there. So just be aware of what's happening in your space. First advice. And let's hit this last topic, Austin. It's called transparency and accountability in the use of AI. So
Yeah.
they want to ensure that if it's being used, that it's disclosed. So this is AI performances, AI writers, AI systems. And to me, this seems like the most logical and something that there's already a framework for now. Although I think now when they're saying that things are CGI and that they're using this technology, it's kind of a selling point that they're using it at. Like, look at what we've been able to
Yeah.
do. But I think with this one seems logical to me.
This one's interesting to me. I think that it's obvious that when you're watching a CGI film that it's obviously computer generated. So I'm interested to see if you're going to start noticing a bunch of notifications all over the place saying that this film was made with 75% AI, or like even how that goes, because it kind of like it's going to be a strange thing to witness, and I wonder if it's going to psychologically take away from the appeal of the whole thing in some like subconscious way. For me, I think it might, but they're going to have to probably do it. I want to know. I mean, I think that it goes for everything. It goes for, written text, um, anything that you read on social media. I mean, I think that any sort of content should first and foremost be tagged as either human or AI. So that's a whole another universal topic that I think there's a huge amount of work that has to be done, to accommodate. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, is it like a standard? Is it like a like open source license sort of thing? Like what is it? You know?
Yeah, we don't know yet. I think that it would be kind of like the they'll be like the drug manufacturers, how they have to disclose the terms and conditions. It's like, Mike, take this medicine. Well, it might cause anal leakage, and it might cause premature death, and it might, it's like this super fast red thing on the bottom. I have no idea what it's going to be, but it seems like, okay, well, yeah, we use some AI in this. It's going to have like a AI free movie.
Right.
Like lead free tuna or something, mercury free tuna. I don't know. It'll be some kind of seal of approval that the movie industry will come up with, and create on their own and put their own stamp on it. And this was made with real humans.
200 humans were spared and got to sit home and do nothing.
Got paid for nothing. And then in 10 years from now, they'll start protesting the fake humans being used. And, why isn't Jennifer, oh, look, Jennifer Aniston is out in public. And they're going to be like, who's that? Oh, that's somebody else who we named something else.
Yeah,
The likeness of
exactly.
her.
And
Didn't you see her disclaimer? Jeez.
yeah, you mean wait, hold on. You didn't read the disclaimer? Shame on you. Enter the rabbit hole right here. Like this is the top of the funnel of the rabbit hole, probably.
I
If I
think I
was
think
to
that you gave the best advice that anybody's ever going to hear is just copy out the terms and conditions, paste them into Chat GPT, and say, here's a contract. What should I be worried about? I'm going to start doing that tomorrow. It's every software. I'm going to be like, I'm going to go read the terms and conditions and find out at least what I'm giving up. So,
yeah. There's a product idea there that just goes in and ingests all the terms and conditions of all like the mainstream, news outlets, all this stuff, and it just summarizes all of them. I swear to God, you would never sign one of these terms and conditions. You would,
never,
you would,
never.
you would be like, no. So
Yeah, that one with the photographs, it was bullet point 4 or something. It was made the rounds, and it was, people were uploading 10 pictures of themselves to have these AI generated caricatures done. And it literally said, we own your likeness for eternity. It's like it was signing a contract with the devil. And who knows where they are now? Like the company doesn't exist, but they were purchased by somebody privately, and now somebody else owns that likeness. And it's strange to be able to ever turn over your likeness. To now, like we discussed, if you have the contract in front of you and you're sitting there and you get to sign away, in your lucid mind, that's one thing, and you're going to be compensated for it. You get to make that choice. I wouldn't suggest a long-term contract, but you have a choice in that signature. Whereas a lot of these now, it's everybody just clicks yes to the terms and conditions. So if you're in the acting, writing, creative world, we're at a crossroads, and you just need to be more diligent about signing these things. I mean, I know how exciting it is to try to get things made and how you want to see your dream realized, but it's probably a little bit more prudent now. And now that we have AI tools that can do it for you, you don't have to pay a lawyer. You could just go to lawyer.ai and get your stuff checked out for free. It's probably worth doing. It's probably worth doing.
Yeah.
That'll be your homework for the week. Who's in Sag-Aftra or you WGA folks? Like, let's start looking at the terms and conditions. Homework. Homework.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Understand what you're signing up for.
And then tell us about it.
Yeah, let us know. But yeah, so the negotiations are obviously still ongoing, but it seems like Sag-Aftra is gonna be prepared to fight for their people, which is huge. So keep on fighting. I love it.
Fight the fight.
So I think that pretty much does it. We'll have to keep an eye on this one for sure. I would anticipate maybe some follow-up conversations about it as it develops, but there you have it, folks.
I just had a movie quote to end on. So in The American President, there's a line where he's having an argument with Annette Bening, and he says something. He's like, "You fight the fights you can win," and then no, it's actually Martin Sheen, and he says, "No, you fight the fights worth winning," and that's it, right? That's
brilliant.
The one. So anyway.
So we'll leave you with that brilliant quote.
Hope I got it right.
Well, I'm sure whomever's listening to this will cross-check you on the internet and make sure you got it right. So if not, drop us a note and let us know. Call Mike out for not knowing his quotes.
Bye.
Until next time, thanks everyone.